Welcome, everybody. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in just a minute here. Thanks for being here. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being patient. We will get started in just a second. Glad to have everyone here. Just letting folks in from the waiting room. Yeah, thanks for being with us. Okay. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. As if folks join in the chat, we will make sure to wrap them in. But thanks everyone for being here today. Really glad to have you here. My name is Erica Lycan. I use they, them pronouns, and I am co-founder of the People's Coalition, along with my fellow co-founder Rima Mohammed. We'd like to welcome you and thanks again for joining us. Real briefly, if you're not familiar with us, the People's Coalition is a growing organization and movement founded early in January of this year, 2025. We are dedicated to uniting diverse communities, advocating for justice, equity, and sustainability. Our mission is to amplify the voices of marginalized and underrepresented groups, mobilize collective action for social and political change, and build a more inclusive society where every individual has the opportunity to thrive. Through solidarity, education, and grassroots organizing, we aim to dismantle systems of oppression and create lasting solutions that prioritize people over profit, equity over privilege, and justice over inequity. One of the ways we can change what is broken and address systemic inequalities in Michigan is by voting for and electing candidates who are determined to work for the benefit and the betterment of Michiganders. We've all seen the importance of the Attorney General role in Michigan, especially in these last 2 years. Getting to hear from the three Democratic candidates for Attorney General gives us a chance to know these folks better, know where they're coming from, hear their experiences, and what their intentions are if elected. So with that, if you're new to the People's Coalition, I will just say we would love to have you join us. Obviously, you found us and you made it here this evening. I will put in the chat real briefly. Join our coalition link and our social media information. Would be glad to have you follow us there and keep tabs with what we're up to. Uh, I will add too that building community, hosting events and actions, and organizing, of course, takes work, and it also does have financial costs. So while this is not at all mandatory, if you're able to donate $5, $15, whatever you can, that does help us grow and helps us continue to do what we're doing. I'm going to post a donation link as well before we get going. So with that being said, I will just give a little bit of intro to the setup for this evening, and then we'll get started on our questions. So um, tonight's questions for the candidates were compiled and put together from all the questions we got, suggestions from everyone in this group that's here tonight, which is great. So thanks for sharing all these great ideas, thoughts, and concerns. Because we have a lot to ask in a limited amount of time, we will not be able to pitch additional questions from the audience to our guest speakers. But any further questions you have, if you want to chat them to me, I'm the host, and I'm glad to pass those along to the candidates, and we can publish their responses on our website afterwards. So we have the group chat closed too to save time and focus our attention this evening. A reminder to our candidates that this evening is an individual response format, not a debate. So please use your allotted time to answer the questions posed to you by the moderators. We'll keep things civil, right, and focus on the questions. And you will each have 2 minutes to answer each one of the questions. So um, now it's time to meet our candidates. I will let Mark Toten, Eli Savitt, and Karen McDonald introduce themselves, each in 2-minute statements. The broad question that you can address here is, what are your top priorities as Attorney General if elected? And we will start with Karen. I'm going to work on spotlighting folks. But Karen, I will ask you to unmute. We'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Rima. Thank you, Erica. I appreciate everyone here showing up. It's early, but this election is so important. And I really welcome the opportunity for everyone here to get to know me a little bit better. I'm the Oakland County prosecutor. I'm a former judge. I'm a former private practice lawyer, but I started out as a public school teacher. And I've lived in Oakland County most of my adult life, but I didn't grow up here. I grew up in a really small town, and I am the daughter of two people who grew up in pretty severe poverty. My dad was a construction worker. My mom stayed at home, and my sisters and I only were able to do the things that we have done and realize the dreams that we had through public education, student loans, student education and grants, and I only bought my first house because I had a FHA loan. And when I look around right now, all of those things are being threatened. And I'm running for AG because the AG is the people's lawyer, and they defend people who need advocacy and to be defended, and they defend people's rights, and they make us safe. The AG does. And we all know how important that person is right now. And that's what I've been doing my whole life. And I'm also a mom. And I put myself through law school, and I had a baby my third year, and I know what it is to struggle. I've struggled my whole life, and I'm proud of that. But there's way too much at stake right now to not elect somebody who is adamant and passionate about protecting the people of this state. And so I am running for AG, and I would love to I want to hear your questions, and I would love your support.
Love that. Thank you so much. And you came in just a little bit under time. I appreciate it. Thanks, Karen.
I think I have 9 seconds, but I
Well,
won't ask.
you did good. I like it. Wonderful. So, I will have Ellie go next, and I'm gonna unmute you, and I will pin your video here. All right.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much to the People's Coalition for hosting this important forum. My name is Ellie Savitt. I'm currently in my second term as the Washtenaw County prosecuting attorney. Prior to that, I started my career actually as a public school teacher. I taught eighth grade special education and general education classes. My legal career started out working for Justice O'Connor and Ginsburg on the United States Supreme Court. And before being the prosecutor, I've had a broad array of experiences, which I think prepare me for this role. I have been a practicing environmental attorney suing corporate polluters on behalf of states. I've done civil rights and public interest lawsuits, including leading the city of Detroit's lawsuit against the opioid industry for poisoning our communities. And look, I am running for attorney general right now because I believe there is no more important position in the state of Michigan. We are seeing the dismantling intentionally of our rights and our liberties from the federal government. And the attorney general is the one position in the state of Michigan that can go into court on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan and fight back when the Trump administration violates the law and harms Michiganders. And I will do that. But it's also equally important because we are going to see bad actors step into this gap in enforcement of at the federal level, that we stand up for people against powerful interests. The federal government is intentionally cutting back on civil rights protections and environmental protections and worker and consumer protections. And we need an attorney general who is going to stand up to those who would violate the law, who would take advantage of this gap in enforcement and enforce our state level environmental, civil rights, consumer, and worker protection laws. I'm proud to be in this race fighting for the people. I don't take corporate PAC money. I never have. I never will. And that is because I believe this role needs to be laser focused on fighting for the people, even against the most powerful. And I look forward to the discussion and to your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Appreciate that. We're going to hear from Mark next. Mark, I will ask you to unmute, and I will get you up and spotlighted here. There we go.
All right. Well, thank you so much, first of all, Rima and Erica, for putting this together. It's really, really good to be here. It's an important discussion. I want to thank all of you for participating as well. Again, my name is Mark Totten. I just want to say right off the start, what we all know, like we are living in a dangerous and unprecedented moment. And if I am privileged to serve as the next Attorney General of Michigan, my number one priority will be to use every power I have in this office to stop the president who continues to harm Michiganders every single day. I'll tell you just a little bit about my story if I can. So I was born and raised in Kalamazoo. My mom was a single parent, first grade teacher for 30 years, MEA member. My dad was a long distance truck driver. I went to law school because I wanted a set of tools to be able to make a difference on issues that I cared about. I've held many roles as a lawyer, but I'll mention two. In 2019, the governor asked me to serve as her chief legal counsel, and I did that for her first 4 years. I love that job. Every day, I had the ability to protect folks all across Michigan. One of the things I'm especially proud of was leading her fight to protect reproductive freedom. The case she filed did that for a long time in here before we put those rights in the state constitution after the Dobbs decision took them away. In 2022, I left that job because the president nominated me to serve as U.S. attorney. In that role, I protected children against predators, seniors against fraudsters. I prosecuted white supremacists, protected civil rights, and took on public corruption as well. In addition to taking on Donald Trump, my second level of priorities are filling the gaps where federal law enforcement has just laid down its sword, protecting workers, protecting civil rights, and taking on corporations that cheat and steal as well. Look forward to the discussion tonight.
Great. No, thanks so much, Mark. Go ahead, Rima.
So thank you again for those responses and introductions. So we'll start with the questions. Again, 2 minutes each. So the first question is going to focus on fascism and authoritarianism. So and we'll post this in the chat so you'll see it. What will be your strategy to protect the rights of Michiganders and Michigan institutions from the onslaught of Trump attacks and federal overreach, including hard and/or unprecedented fights against administration in order to protect the rights of citizens, as we've seen with attorney generals in California and Massachusetts? Please share examples of past experiences or anticipated future action. And we'll post the question, and we'll start with Mark, then Karen, then Ellie.
Am I unmuted, Erica?
You're
You can
unmuted.
go for it.
Okay, thanks. Look, like this president has made clear since before he was elected that he has authoritarian ambitions. And, maybe it was appropriate at the beginning to say that we were on a slide towards authoritarianism. And I think every day we are seeing the very real marks of a president who is working every day to implement it. And, I think the attorney general is on the very front lines of fighting back. I certainly think that what we do in terms of protecting elections, what we do in terms of all the threatened and real uses of military force are especially important right now. I'll just mention that, I was on the very front lines in 2020 when we faced this president the first time. The governor asked me to lead her effort to protect the 2020 election. She played a very important role to certify the results. And I put together a team, built a structure that included my counterparts across all of the front-leaning states with Democratic governors. We brought on dozens of lawyers to help us. We prepared briefs. I ran tabletop exercises. We were ready to file lawsuits. And, we did everything we could to make sure that we were ready. And I just think the next 3 or 4 years are going to be an ongoing effort just like that. In terms of the threatened use of military, I mean, there is a very, very limited scope to use military force for domestic criminal purposes. And, there has to be something extreme like an insurrection. And of course, that's not what we face. The president has indicated his intention to use the military for exactly these purposes. And I'll do two things. First of all, I'll be prepared to file suit in federal court when he violates the Posse Comitatus Act. And second of all, I'll make very clear that I will stand ready to enforce state criminal law against anyone who acts outside the scope of federal authority. Again, I don't think we concede an inch. We know that these things are connected. We know that the use of military now may well be preparing to use it when we have a future election, and we have to fight back at every turn.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So now it is Karen, if you can answer that question.
Great. Sorry. Look, I think we can safely say all three of us, thankfully, will vigorously and passionately file these federal lawsuits We know right now that is the only tool that has been effective. And together, the attorneys general of this country, the Democrats, have joined in these lawsuits and been extremely successful. They are the only tool, and it has to be the top priority of the next attorney general. And I think both Mark and Ellie and I are absolutely aligned on that. And we're all three of us are lawyers, and we all know how to file lawsuits. What's the difference though? And I think what we have to really look at is the experience that each of us has had. It also is going to take a very strong person who can have courage to make tough calls and withstand the scrutiny of a lot of criticism. Nobody's happy with everything that you do. But aligning your priorities and making sure you are using your resources in the right way to protect the people of the state of Michigan against bad actors, but also right now, there is everything on the line. And if there wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this. I don't need to tell this group of people how important and terrifying what is going on. And we do have tools. The Attorney General is the only person that has the most effective tool to immediately take action. And just look at what I've done. You know, as the prosecutor, making tough calls and withstanding a lot of criticism, and but always listening and always being accountable and transparent about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and never once shying or cowering and saying, I don't want to deal with that. It's too political. I was also a judge, and also I've raised five kids, and I understand what it means to make tough calls, and I also understand what is at stake. And it's absolutely everything right now.
Thank you, Karen. Ellie, if you can answer the same question, please.
Yeah, thank you. So look, I led with this in my opening. There is no more important job for the state attorney general right now than fighting back against what is coming out of Washington, D.C. And look, the state attorneys general are, again, the one actor that can go into court, that has standing to sue on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan. And that's an incredibly important job. And we've seen, as referenced in the question, state attorneys general standing up and doing that. And of course, I will do that as well. In terms of past experiences, I will say that we've already been doing this in the Washington County Prosecutor's Office. Since literally day one of the Trump administration, when he issued his unconstitutional and racist birthright citizenship order, we have joined with coalitions of cities and counties across the nation to file in cases ranging from the birthright citizenship order to illegal federal firings, to federal funding cuts, to the deployment of the military to the streets of American cities. And look, I will tell you that state attorneys general have been successful at winning these lawsuits. I think the latest estimates are 1.8 billion has been brought back to Michigan as a result of AG initiated lawsuits. But it's also just as important, if not more important, that AGs be in court standing up for the rights of the people that they serve right now. One case that I will just mention that came down from the United States Supreme Court that I think warrants robust AG involvement is this case out of Los Angeles, in which the Supreme Court, in an unreasoned decision, said that ICE can simply stop and detain somebody for being or appearing Latino, working a low-wage job, and speaking Spanish. That cuts against every single thing that our country stands for. State attorneys general need to be directly in that suit, not just filing briefs, but filing on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan. And in that case, and so many others, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. So Erica, go ahead for the
Yeah,
next question.
thanks. All right. So I'm going to read the next question and I'm going to put it in the chat also. So, we have seen outright attacks and targeting on immigrant communities, LGBTQ rights, Black and Brown communities. How would you, as Attorney General, support citizens in times like these, whether against federal government's immigration policies or protecting these groups as their rights are threatened and rolled back? And how will you determine priorities and setting policies for your office involving these communities? So Ellie, we will have you start, and then we'll have Mark, and then we'll have Karen.
Only 2 minutes for that
Put you
question.
on the spot here.
Look, I'll answer the last part of this first in terms of determining priorities and setting policies involving these communities. I firmly believe that we cannot prioritize one community over the other. This is exactly what the Trump administration wants us to do. They want us to pick and choose. They want us to forget about certain communities. They want us to back down from certain fights. And I'm not going to do that as Attorney General. It's going to mean a lot of work. It's going to mean dedicating a lot of resources to protecting various communities, but we need to stand with every community right now. Quite literally, the Attorney General represents the people of the state of Michigan, and that means every single community that encompasses the people. I noted at the end of my last question that I think states need to be more directly involved in some of these cases that have already been brought by individuals. And I'll just use this to dwell on that a little bit more. One of the reasons potentially that the US Supreme Court may have reached the decision that it reached last week, allowing these unconstitutional detentions of Latino citizens in Los Angeles, is because they may have thought, said, oh, well, under Supreme Court precedent, these individuals don't have standing. The individuals that are suing can't go into court and claim that they'll be subject to this future action. This is where the state attorney general is so important, because the state AG has particular litigating authority on behalf of all of the people of the state. And even if an individual can't get their foot in the door in court, the state AG can. We need to be directly involved in these lawsuits. And beyond that, we need to be enforcing state level civil rights protections, because we know the federal government has distorted and dismantled federal civil rights enforcement. And that is something that needs to be a top priority, and it will be when I'm Attorney General.
Thanks, Ellie. Appreciate it. We will hear from Mark next.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. Obviously, this is top of mind and so important. I mean, look, to say the obvious, like everyone, every Michigander has to be able to carry out their lives free from hate and discrimination. And the state AG right now, more than ever, is on the front lines of doing that kind of work. I mean, you know, it's the fact that the federal government, on the one hand, has withdrawn from doing the work around civil rights, the very work that I've been doing for the last 3 years, prosecuting white supremacists, prosecuting hate crimes. The federal government's walked away from that, but of course it's worse than that, because the DOJ Civil Rights Division has been weaponized against the very people it's supposed to protect, and in immigration enforcement and against the LGBT community. In one area after another, we have seen this administration target vulnerable communities. And so, let me say something about what I've done and what I'll do. As U.S. Attorney, one of the first things I did was make sure I had a strong civil rights team. I secured extra funding. I made sure I had the team to do the fight. The second thing I did was launched a public education program called United Against Hate. And I traveled around, spent about 40% of my time, 50% of my time outside of the office, meeting with folks in the community, the 49 communities and 49 counties that I represented, and trying to listen to folks about their concerns and educate them about their federal civil rights. And the last thing I did was to brought cases. And I think that's the same thing I'll need to do here as Attorney General. Make sure I have a diverse staff that represents the communities I serve. Work on making sure I'm connected, that I'm present, that I'm listening, that I have town halls, especially among vulnerable communities. And then lastly, bringing the cases. Ellie mentioned it, and I'll mention it as well. I mean, the decision coming out of California by the Supreme Court is not hardly a decision. There's no reasoning, but the reasoning of the one conservative justice that spoke out suggests that they can stop people because of the color of their skin and where they work. And that's just absolutely unacceptable. And whether it is in the right circumstances using state law or going into federal court and using federal law, we have to be aggressive to hold this administration accountable.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Karen, last but not least, we will hear from you on this question.
Protecting marginalized communities is one of the main reasons I ran for prosecutor in 2020. And it's one of the main things that is my top priority every day. And the one thing I know, because I've learned, is that it's not enough to sit around and talk about racial disparity or protecting marginalized communities. You have to listen and you have to develop relationships. And that's what I've done. I developed and started, and we participate in the very first Racial Justice Advisory Council in my office. And we don't just show up when it's election time. We are meeting with members and stakeholders from communities like Pontiac, which has a serious distrust of law enforcement. And so we're out in the community, a racial justice fair. We are sponsoring and holding expungement fairs, and not just me, the people in my office. I also made sure the people in my office reflect the communities in which we serve. And I want to just be really candid. These conversations sometimes they're not a lot of handshaking and smiling. Rightfully so, they come to the table, each members of these communities, and say, I want answers. This is what I want. And they have a right to do that. And I sit in those rooms. We partnered with Fair Michigan and to educate our office about the LGBTQ plus community. This is really important if we're going to prosecute hate crimes. So I started a hate crimes unit. I just today got back from speaking at the National Association of Pretrial Services Association. It was 1,000 people, and they are totally dedicated solely on pretrial supervision and how it has a disparate effect on marginalized communities. And I'm the very first prosecutor ever to present, and it's because of the work I've done. We partnered with University of Michigan and a transparency project to show our community there is in fact a racial disparity. It is not an equal playing field. And these are just some of the things I've done and I'll do every day. But the last thing people want is 10 talking points about what policies are. We have to be in these rooms, we have to be in these communities, and we have to sit and listen so we can learn and understand because there are so many issues. But
That's time, Karen.
okay, just if I can just conclude
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah, go
sentence.
ahead.
There people can't afford to live right now. And so we also have to focus on that and listen to that.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. That's right.
You're going first for the next question, so I will read it and I will keep you unmuted. So the next question for all is, oh, Rima, you're reading it. I'm sorry. I'm just
It's
jumping
okay. It's
in.
fine. We're trying to alternate.
We
It's
are.
fine. Okay, so this is so what has your personal approach been on accepting corporate or large PAC donations for your AG campaign now or in the future leading up to the election? And then how would you use your role to address corporate and PAC money donations in state and local election campaigns and the outsized influence of corporate and special interest group lobbying, such as APAC and other groups that are similar?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Look, we have to get money out of politics. And I think I'm the only one so far that's been already attacked by Betsy DeVos. Um, I I haven't accepted corporate PAC checks or special interest checks, uh, but I'll say this: whoever the nomination goes to, we cannot stand by and let the Republican Party basically buy votes and buy an election. We cannot do that. I've raised a lot of money and I've run a lot of tough races. And the one thing I am known for among so many defense attorneys actually who've given me money is that the only thing you get for it is professionalism and somebody who's going to work really hard to do the right thing. My vote is not for sale and it never has been. I'm going to listen to somebody whether they gave me $1,000 or zero. And I think the idea that we have people like DeVos funding essentially entire campaigns, which is really the Trump playbook, right? The question isn't what's good for Michigan, it's what does Trump want us to do? And that's all backed by funders. We can't stand by and let that happen. We have to make changes here. But we also need to elect candidates who we trust and who have a long history of and showing that regardless of who gives me what, I am always going to do the right thing. And I am never, ever, ever going to be influenced by pressure, money, whatever it is. I'm going to always do the right thing.
Thank you, Karen. The question is for Ellie. This question's for Ellie now.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be very clear on this. My personal approach now and in the past has been, I'm not taking that money. I've never taken a corporate PAC check, not in this campaign, not in my previous campaigns. I've never taken an APAC check, not in this campaign, not in my previous campaign, and I won't. And look, we need to get money out of politics. There's no question about it, but I think that this is particularly important for this role. Money has a distorting influence on legislators. It's true. And corporate PACs and big money donors should not be able to buy influence over those who make the laws. It's even more important, though, that they not have influence over those who enforce the laws, which is precisely what the AG is supposed to be doing. I know this because back in 2017, you can look this up. I wrote a whole article about the distorting influence of fossil fuel interests on state attorneys general. And what my research there found was that it's not just Republicans that are being influenced by corporate money, by corporate PACs. It's Democrats as well. There was a case of a Democratic attorney general that 10 minutes after being approached by a lobbyist who had given tens of thousands of dollars to his campaign in the past, dropped a consumer protection investigation into the company that that lobbyist represented. That's wrong. And this is exactly why we don't have trust in the system right now. So I'm not taking that money. I'm not even going to create the appearance that my enforcement can be bought or can be distorted. That's been true in all of my previous races, and it is true now. More broadly, I will work tirelessly to eliminate the influence of corporate money in our politics. We need to overturn Citizens United, and hopefully there is an opportunity to litigate in favor of that in the coming years, and I will do that. I will also rigorously defend any state level laws which puts checks on the distorting influence of corporate money in our politics, because I think nothing can be more important at this point.
Thank you, Ellie. Mark, if you can answer the same question.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say right out front, I already said I will not take any corporate PAC money. I'll just, because of the question here, add that I'm not taking and won't take any APAC money as well. We have a very, very broken citizen. Citizens United is certainly part of it, but it's deeper than that. It's state law is infected, federal law is infected as well. I'll just say as an example here, I don't think there is any better test case about what we want in a Michigan Attorney General than whether you're willing to take money from the utilities, DTE and consumers, or their executives. I mean, look, the Attorney General plays a very unique role here. The AG is the only person in the state of Michigan who can challenge these utilities when they seek to raise their rates. And what we know is that Michiganders have some of the highest utility rates in the nation, certainly the highest in the Midwest. And we know that DTE and consumers year after year continue to give 9 and 11% returns to their shareholders, which is more than you can get just going into the stock market for many years right now. And so it's why I've made a pledge that I will never take a dollar from a DTE, a consumer, any other utilities PACs, or from their executives as well, because I want people to have confidence that I'm going to be right there standing up to these utilities and holding them accountable.
Thank you, Mark. So I'll pass the next question to Erica.
Sounds good. Thank you. And Mark, I'm going to leave you unmuted because you're going to be first up here, but I will read the question out loud. So, in the past 2 years in particular, students and community protesters advocating for Palestine across the country have been prosecuted, doxxed, surveilled, disciplined without due process, and targeted by the state and federal governments, Board of Regents, and even attorneys general for their participation in peaceful protests. What do you think of how things have been handled at the universities, especially against pro-Palestine protesters, and how would you handle these issues and concerns? And Mark, I will have you go first, please.
Yep, that sounds good. This is an important question, and I'm really glad you've raised it. I mean, look, more than ever, the right of free speech has to be vigorously protected. I mean, just look at the context that we're in. And the example of protesters on the Gaza issue is a great example. I mean, what is happening in Gaza is horrendous, it is immoral, and it must stop. It is so important that students and others feel free to protest that in a way that keeps others safe, but feel free under the First Amendment to express their views. And it's also, in the broader context, so important to have dissent right now. We know the president is looking for opportunities to quell and restrict First Amendment rights. And so, look, I've worked very closely with Attorney General Nessel in both my roles as Chief Legal Counsel for the governor and as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer across 49 counties as U.S. Attorney. But I don't agree with everything. And this is an example where I just strongly disagree with her. I think for two reasons, the prosecution of the student protesters in the U of M campus was wrong. First of all, because I just think it's very heavy-handed for a state AG to step in what felt like a very local matter. And then second of all, and more importantly, I just think it has the inevitable effect of chilling free speech, especially speech that was in a quintessential forum for expressing First Amendment rights, a university campus. There has to be another way to be able to deal with that. And my alternative is to stay closely connected to communities, to be an outspoken advocate using my bully pulpit for free speech, and if necessary, to file lawsuits to make sure that free speech is protected while student safety and rights are protected as well.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that answer. We have got Karen next, please.
Sorry, I thought I was going last on that.
No, you're fine.
I think some of the most important rights I have, the right to choose, still in Michigan, thankfully, the right to vote, were the result of protests that started on college campuses. And that I'm proud to live in a country where that's our history. And not only do I think it's inappropriate and not the role of the Attorney General to step on in counties where there's a duly elected county prosecutor who has the resources to do that. I also think it's not the way that the university should respond, and I've been pretty vocal about that. I've spent the last couple months talking to students and adults and lawyers, all who are involved, who were protesting or representing people that were charged or were witnesses there. And well, I don't have the facts of those cases, and it's not appropriate. And I think Mark and Ellie will agree. We don't normally like to comment on somebody else's case unless you know the evidence. I do feel pretty informed, and I don't think it was the right thing to do based on the facts that I have. I'm very concerned about the essentially bullying going on, and it's simply an attempt to take away our right to free speech. And it is also not the way that we want to show up as a university, as a community, as a state, as a country. That is going in and expelling and charging and forcefully removing people who are exercising their constitutional rights. That is one of the greatest thing about this country is the wrong thing to do, and we have to stand up for it. And I also, I don't want the Attorney General charging cases in my county. I've made that pretty clear. Sometimes she listens, sometimes she doesn't. But that's because I have a job to do, and my job is to make the tough call, and I have a long history of doing that.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Ellie, we'll hear from you next, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, look, I have the University of Michigan in my jurisdiction, and since 2023, just from the University of Michigan alone, just for Gaza protest alone, we have gotten 64 requests for charges, and we have denied 60 of those. And that is reflective of my core belief that we should not be criminalizing speech on campus, that peaceful civil disobedience, even if it technically crosses a line into where something can be charged with trespassing or something like that, that is not appropriate for the criminal system. Protest has been happening on college campuses for forever, and there is no Palestine exception to free speech. The four cases that, I do think there's a line where it can be crossed. Protest-related activity doesn't immunize you from assaultive behavior or anything like that. But even in the four that we did charge, we worked to make sure that not a single person that was charged got a criminal record. It wasn't going to hold folks back immigration-wise. It wasn't going to cause people to lose their job. Not a single one has a criminal record. So that is how I view protests generally. I've been clear on that since being elected prosecutor. And again, there's no Palestine exception. I do not, in light of that, obviously, I think our denials have made clear that I don't agree with how the university has handled these cases. And frankly, I think that there needs to be much more dialogue and listening on college campuses now, rather than heavy-handed enforcement on students and faculties who are protesting the atrocities that we see in Gaza right now. People are hurting right now. There are people with family members who have woken up every single day for the last 2 years to bombs over their head. Children are starving in Gaza, and it is not inappropriate to listen to your students, to listen to faculty members, instead of taking heavy-handed approaches that could squelch free speech.
Thanks, Ellie.
So I will ask the next question. So there is significant concern around our criminal justice system disproportionately affecting marginalized communities, especially Black men. How do you plan to balance keeping people safe and moving away from a broken and punitive legal system? And we'll start with Karen, then Ellie, then Mark.
This is precisely the work that I've been doing, and one of the main reasons that I ran for prosecutor in 2020. I ran on a criminal justice reform platform, and these were things that the county really supported, and I made those promise I made due on those promises. We started a conviction integrity unit. We immediately started tracking who we're charging, what community they're from, what race, what ethnicity they are. But then we started having really important conversations. It does matter who we're charging. It does matter where they come from and what the impact of that criminal charge is. And it does matter that we are charging and prosecuting Black men at a much more significant number than anyone else. And I don't want to start, I'm not getting into a back and forth with judges. We want to show them data. And that's why we've partnered with the University of Michigan to show that, because we know that is true. That's just science. That's data. That is happening. But it starts with giving prosecutors a forum and educate to use your discretion to make decisions about charging and asking for pretrial supervision or sentences that make sense with the overall goal. What's the best thing for our community? What keeps us safer? And we know that short periods of incarceration do not keep us safer. And for the first time ever in the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, you can ask all of the prosecutors that are there. There's over 100. There's 200 people in the office. We have conversations like that. When you stand in the courtroom and you say, Karen McDonald, on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan, which I have done, it's all the people. It's not just a victim. It's all the people. It's also the defendant. And I think focusing on prevention and how did we get here and how can we keep people out of the criminal justice system. I also appointed and created the first ever chief of diversions and specialty courts, precisely in that vein to make sure that we are addressing the disparity in how we charge, and not just charge, but if you track the science, it's not just that we're charging Black men at a much more significant rate. They're also getting much higher sentences and much more stringent pretrial supervision, which is been one of my main focuses as the prosecutor. And I'm really proud of that work. And I think that's why I was asked to speak yesterday to 1,000 people across the country who are also dedicated to that one mission. We have to address that. And it
And
takes,
we're
Sorry,
at time.
it's time.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Karen. So, Ellie?
Yeah. Look, so I have one core belief, which hopefully should be non-controversial, but these days, given the rhetoric coming out of DC, apparently it's not. The criminal justice system should impose consequences if it does, based on what somebody did, not because of who they are. And that has been a guiding light of my time as prosecuting attorney. We launched the most robust prosecutor transparency project, I'm told, in the country. We opened up our office's files and had outside researchers that were totally independent look through to identify every point in the system that we were seeing racial disparities and people being treated differently because of race. And all of those findings are available on our website. Transparency means it's fully public, and we've done that. But look, You don't need to wait for researchers to go into your case files to know that there are significant racial disparities in our system. All you've got to do is simply walk into a courtroom and see who is there. So we put into place a number of policies geared towards eliminating the types of disproportionate charges that we see levied against Black people and people of color in our community, because I know that there are certain things that I have done or people that look like me have done in the past that have not warranted criminal charges, but somebody that doesn't look like me has faced criminal consequences as a result. That's true, for example, for young people that engage in standard adolescent misbehavior, and we've taken efforts to stop the school to prison pipeline. It's true for people that are charged on pretextual stops and resisting and obstructing. So this is the work we've done in the prosecutor's office. You can look at our website for the results there. But I want to say, as Attorney General, where we're not ultimately responsible for the day-to-day of prosecution in every county, we need to start by encouraging local communities and getting the resources in to do precisely this. We need to start by looking at exactly where disparities are arising in the system, because if we don't do that, if we continue to operate behind a black box, we are never going to be able to address those disparities. That is something that I've championed in Washtenaw County. As I said, we've done it, and I think it's something that we need in every single one of Michigan's 83 counties as a starting point.
Thank you, Ellie. So Mark, the same question.
This is such an important issue, and I'm really glad we're talking about it. I mean, no one should be treated differently in our criminal justice system because of the color of their skin. And what we know is that there is data in Michigan and across the nation that shows that at every stage within the criminal justice system, that people of color are treated more severely in terms of the number of stops, in terms of the number of arrests, the number of charges, convictions, and sentencing lengths as well. And we have to be focused on reform and seeking to change that. Let me just share a little bit, if I can, about my experience in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I took the oath of office on May 5th of 2022. And I remember just kind of looking over, the stream of things that would come across my desk and starting to see that there were defendants, many of them people of color, who were nonviolent drug offenders that were getting sentenced for 20 or 30 years. And I was just honestly a little blown away that I was seeing this. These are people who had no assaultive history, no record of violence. And so I implemented a number of changes in my office. One thing I did was to make sure, first of all, that I had a diverse staff. I had one or two people of color among my prosecutors. We did not look like the communities we represented. And so in ways that were consistent with federal law, I built a team that did look like the communities we serve. The second thing I did is to restrict very severely the use of charges that invoked mandatory minimums, which in part are responsible for some of the more severe sentences, to make sure that we were only using them in the most egregious cases. Another thing I did was to require prosecutors at sentencing to advocate for a sentence below the recommendation if they thought that's what justice deserved. Sometimes there's a culture among prosecutors where they feel like that's a mistake. And I want to help change that culture. And so those are a few things I did and an approach I'll have as Attorney General as well.
Thank you, Mark. So Erica, the next question.
Yeah, I will put it in the chat here. So the next question is, what will you do as Attorney General to limit the corporate and institutional expansion, such as data centers and factories and associated outcomes related to these expansions, especially in vulnerable areas? How would you hold these companies and institutions accountable when negative outcomes impact these communities? And Ellie, we'll start with you, please.
Yeah, and this is a really important question because we're seeing the expansion of data centers, the tremendous pollution that is associated with artificial intelligence, and these are regularly situated in predominantly minority, low-income communities that are already suffering from the worst of air pollution. And I'll give you an example of this. Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company has gone into South Memphis and built a data center there with gas turbines that are unpermitted, and it is causing nitrogen oxide pollution, particulate matter pollution in what is already one of the most heavily impacted environmental areas in the entire country, and it's making it worse. And kids have asthma, and people are getting leukemia as a result of this unregulated corporate greed. Now, we've got an environmental protection agency right now that is an environmental protection agency in name only. In fact, what they are doing is protecting the corporate polluters. And this is exactly where state enforcement of environmental laws and state lawsuits under, for example, the Clean Air Act are so important. If you are going to build a factory or build a data center someplace, you need to be complying with air standards. You cannot build those in communities where it is going to exacerbate health outcomes, exacerbate air pollution, and cause people to lose their life. Human life is more important than artificial intelligence. And this is exactly why I think it is so important for an attorney general to have an environmental background, to not be in the pockets of fossil fuel companies. And I'll note that I've also taken the Legal Conservation Voters Pledge, and I'm not taking money from fossil fuel companies or fossil fuel executives. But we cannot sit back in light of federal abdication of environmental rules and allow corporations to expand into vulnerable communities. And I'll fight that tooth and nail, just as I always have as Attorney General.
Thanks, Ellie. Let's hear from Mark on this one next.
So your health, your safety, your environmental well-being should not depend on your zip code. And yet we know across America and in many places in Michigan today that that is certainly the case. And I think there's a few things that I would prioritize as Attorney General to address this issue. I think, first of all, it involves kind of building a structure that is sensitive to environmental justice concerns. There was a lot of good work that happened under the previous presidential administration, and it's all been stripped out. But work to make sure that in decision making at so many key points, whether it was prosecution, whether it was in what the EPA was doing, in White House considerations, that environmental justice voices and affected communities were being heard and really incorporated into decision making. And so thinking through how to do that in the Attorney General's office, certainly one thing I would want to do would be to create an EJ advisory group where that folks that have their ears to the ground, members of affected communities, people that can help educate me on what is happening so that I'm responsive and using my powers accordingly. I think the second thing I would say is, of course, using my enforcement powers, being willing to use state and federal law. Certainly the state law, there aren't a lot of precedent for using state law in this space, but I think that's a place we need to be creative and try to do more to use our state civil rights law for environmental justice concerns. The last thing I would say is just, the AG has a bunch of informal powers as well. I mean, obviously the primary tool is a lawsuit, but like the AG is one of the few people in Michigan who, when he or she speaks up, can get the attention of people. And so, there's not always a lawsuit that can be filed, but having the backbone and be willing to stand up to companies and call them out, even if they followed all the rules and help galvanize public attention, I think that's a really important role as well.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Let's hear from Karen next. Oops, hold on one second, Karen. There we go.
Here's an idea. How about the people who are making the money as a result of these mega data centers, or any corporation that's planted are bearing the cost of that burden on the community? That is the way it should be. What is it? It's ultimately going to mean, are corporations and CEOs going to make less money? Yes, we're headed that way as long as we elect people who will hold them accountable. My parents grew up with literally nothing. My dad built our house almost literally with his two hands. And as soon as he did that, they built a highway almost right through this newer subdivision, and he was so proud. And I didn't realize until I moved away that my entire childhood, the background music was just this major highway because I grew up like that. I didn't know any different. You could always hear it. My dad didn't have the sophistication or the time or the education or the knowledge about what to do about that. And that kind of stuff took place in my hometown all the time. Look, it was really smart. There weren't lawyers in my town, and my parents certainly didn't have the means to fight any of that. And that's really why I do what I do, because we have to the people that are being most affected by this corporate bad action are the people who are in a position the least likely to be able to fight it or to have tools or resources. And that's what drives me every single day. The attorney general has tremendous power over corporations, mergers, acquisitions. And you know how I know that? Because I haven't been in the public sector my whole life. I needed money. I worked in the private sector. I worked really hard and I worked at a corporate law firm. And I know exactly how this stuff works because I used to work there. I'm proud of that. I needed money. I did not have the privilege or the opportunity to be a public servant my whole life. I started out there and then I need to support my family. So I understand it. It's a sophisticated field, the private sector, and I know it. And I know that ultimately what this means is people are going to have to make less money. And uh, the attorney general is the enforcer and has tremendous impact on whether businesses can thrive. And we give them a lot, we offer them a lot of opportunities, but we also have the ability to require them to do a lot of things as well.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate that. All right, I will put the next question in the chat, and Rima is going to pitch it out
Yeah.
to y'all.
So, unfortunately, we are seeing a rise in gun violence throughout the country, and it is especially impacting our schools. As Attorney General, what would your role and strategy be in addressing the root cause or causes of gun violence and supporting the victims? And we'll start with Mark first, then Karen, then Ellie. So go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, another really weighty and important question. I mean, I've said many times when I was the U.S. attorney that I think safety is a civil right, that people should be able to walk through their communities, in their neighborhoods, that their kids should be able to play in the parks without the fear of gun violence. And yet we know all across America that that's not true. And it's not true in our schools as well. There's one statistic that became a reality while I was U.S. attorney that I said to myself, I said, I never, ever want to get used to this. And that's the fact that starting in 2021, the number one cause of death for our youngest Americans, ages 0 through 19, became gun violence. It had always been for many years, decades, it had been car accidents. And ever since, and the trajectory looks just like this, has been gun violence. So what do we do about it? I think there's a few things. I mean, first of all, in a limited role as a prosecutor, I think we need to be focused on uh, we need to be targeted on those who are active shooters and those who are trafficking illegally in guns. You know, I I had the unfortunate responsibility of prosecuting three different people, each of whom was responsible for the death of a different 2-year-old, which was just beyond the pale in my mind, including one person who had trafficked dozens and dozens of guns, one that went in the hands of somebody that then shot and killed a 2-year-old. And so I think being very targeted in our prosecution and making sure we're focused on the drivers of violence is really important. I think the second thing I'd say though is that, look, like so many of our problems, we're never going to prosecute our way out of the gun violence epidemic. Like we have to be focused on prevention as well. There's a lot of data showing that community-based violence intervention programs, and you see these all across Michigan right now. Benton Harbor has one, Lansing's got its Advanced Peace program, Kalamazoo's got one, Detroit's got several programs that have been successful, like supporting those programs and helping intervene on people who are on the path of being trigger pullers is really, really important. We always want to be in the position of preventing a crime and not responding to gun violence.
Thank you, Mark. Karen, you're next.
There's no one that has done more on this panel about gun violence and drawing people's attention to it than me, and I can confidently say that. We are not going to prosecute our way out of gun violence. It is a public health crisis. We did not leave it up to individual communities to solve deaths from automobile accidents or cancer or opioid overdose or keeping kids safe from drowning. The federal government and the state government need to treat it like a public health crisis. I we can't just talk about arresting people with guns. We can't just talk about getting the active shooter. Um, we have to go way upstream. One of the things I did after the Oxford prosecution started was I started just convening experts all over the country because there was nothing in place that addressed overall gun violence prevention. And so I just did that myself, not just schools, because the majority of gun violence killing our children is actually suicide. It's not targeted violence, and the targeted violence is mostly not in schools. But we have to start educating people how they can keep their kids safe, their families safe. And the good news is there's lots of data. We have the very first in this county or in this whole state gun violence prevention unit in my office. We actually sit and talk about and implement the CVIs that Mark just mentioned. I started a foundation called allofuscan.org and raise money into that separate. It's a nonprofit. And we partner with people just to educate not just kids, not just parents, community members, businesses. I'm asked to speak all over the country about this. Yes, I made a tough call. Yes, I prosecuted the first ever parents of a school shooter. That should only be used in very extreme circumstances. And by the way, I was pretty sure I'd be a one-term prosecutor. I never thought I'd be reelected. Didn't care. I thought it was the right thing to do. But I don't let people get sidetracked about that case. And I also don't take a victory lap because we have kids who are dying. Day one, as your next Attorney General, I will start and begin the first ever gun violence prevention division within the Attorney General's office. It is the number one cause of death for children in this country. And we are sitting here right now and we are pretending like that is normal. And it is not. And while the tragic, tragic things we've been seeing in the last few days are horrific, do not think for one second that that horror is any different than what plays out every single day on the streets and in schools. And those people are just as innocent.
Thank you, Karen. Ellie?
When we're prosecuting a gun case involving gun violence, we've already failed because nothing we can do is going to remedy that harm. Yes, we prosecute. Yes, we can send people to prison. But when somebody loses their life as a result of gun violence, there's no justice that you can get there because you can never bring somebody back. Of course, you need to prosecute trigger pullers, people that engage in gun violence. But prevention really is the key, and that means empowering communities. I'll talk a little bit about what we've done on this in the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office. The legislature passed, and I was proud to go up and testify in Lansing in support of our common sense gun safety bills, extreme risk protection order, safe storage laws, universal background check. But those aren't going to do much good if people don't know about them, if people don't know that they have to store their guns safely, if people don't know that an extreme risk protection order is something that is available. So we got a grant and we've been going out into the community, doing community trainings, training the trainers around the intersection between domestic violence and gun violence and the need for extreme risk protection orders. We've been doing that for a couple of years now. And I will mention the intersection between DV and gun violence is pronounced because the presence of a firearm in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. The other thing we've been doing is empowering our community violence interruption groups here in Washtenaw County, and these have worked. We saw over a 50% reduction in gun violence deaths in the last year. We're on pace to go be lower this year. It's worked not just in Washtenaw County, it's also worked in places like Detroit, where you see great CVI organizations that are empowered in the community, are credible messengers like Force Detroit, and have seen sustained reductions in gun deaths in communities because they're on the ground, because they're empowered. It's not about us, it's about communities. And I will just note very, very quickly the last thing that we need to do. We need to expand all that work. We need to empower communities to prevent gun violence, but we also need to stop the threat coming out of DC, because one of the things that the Trump administration has cut funding to is community violence interruption groups. And I've been proud to file a brief along with other cities and counties supporting Force Detroit in challenging those cutbacks. But being tough on crime means empowering those groups. And being tough on crime means that you stop gun violence before it even occurs. That is work we've done in Washington County. It's work I will continue doing as Attorney General.
Thank you, Ellie, for that response. So Erica will ask our last question, and then we'll wrap it up with closing statements. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Erica.
Glad to do that. So the U.S. Supreme Court and recent federal actions have weakened or dismantled key protections for diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, from affirmative action and higher education to limits on the autonomy of states and the schools from pre-K and beyond. What legal and policy strategies would you employ to proactively protect DEI efforts at schools, workplaces, state agencies, especially around funding, grants, and executive orders? And we will start with Karen, please.
Look, we've talked thoroughly, all of us, about the absolute first tool in our toolbox, which is filing these federal lawsuits. But one of my main goals when I took office was making sure that first of all, having discussions that the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office has never had before, um, and making sure that the people in my office were educated and were having conversations and looked like the people that we serve in the community. We started an equity team. I mean, look, until I got there, they didn't even recognize Black History Month. They didn't recognize the Pride Month. We host a panel of returning citizens. We sit down and we talk to every community member, but we also have sessions within our office that reflect the communities that our assistant prosecutors and staff come from. I have Muslim APAs and African American APAs and Jewish APAs, and we talk frequently about what these certain communities face. And I'm really proud that I have developed and created a culture where we are going to have those tough conversations. Um, I have not changed one thing since those actions have taken place, and I have no intention of doing so. Um, DEI, or however you want to describe it, has been going on for a long, long time because it's the right thing to do. And it is absolutely how I show up. Ask anybody who works in my office. I don't just talk about politics or policies or laws or legislatures. I'm in the room. I'm in the room for really difficult discussions. And I think that's my job. And I never send somebody in else to do it. And that means having discussions with people in my office. How does it feel to be the only Black woman who's a prosecutor? Because that was the case when I took office. I actually I promoted and placed the very first person of color in leadership in the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office, which is nothing to brag about because that did not happen until 2021. But I think it just takes courageous leaders and people who are willing to have those discussions, and not just talk about it. We have to have discussions like that, and I really don't care what President Trump thinks of that, and I don't care what the United States Supreme Court thinks of that, and I'm not going to be bullied. That is, I cannot be bullied. We're going to continue to do
Karen,
the right thing.
Yeah, thank
we're
you.
at
We're
So,
time
at
here.
time.
and by the way, just wanted to wrap up. So does the people in Oakland County. Our countywide leadership is exactly on the same page.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry to interrupt. Ellie, we'll hear from you next, please.
Look, I think we need to call these attacks on so-called DEI coming out of this administration and the courts what they really are, which is an attempt to reinstate a system of racial discrimination and discrimination that prioritizes straight white males. I'll give you an example of this. we've seen under the guise of eliminating DEI, the Federal Department of Education announced that it is now going to be reviewing college admissions officers' decisions to make sure that there is no quote unquote illegal DEI going on, that there's no affirmative action going on. And we know exactly what the outcome is going to be there. They are trying to bully admissions officers if they're looking at two applicants into thinking, well, if I let the Black applicant into college over the white applicant, I might get in trouble with the Trump administration. So might as well just let the white person in over the Black applicant, and we won't have any trouble there. That is exactly what this attack on DEI means. It's a Trojan horse, a barely disguised Trojan horse for overt racial discrimination and a return to the time where that was accepted and legal. Here's what I'll say as Attorney General. That cannot happen in Michigan. And this is why it is so tremendously important that, yes, we can file federal lawsuits against this, but we need to use our state Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act as a backstop to make sure that these institutions that are bending over and cowing to the Trump administration and eliminating DEI are not engaged in unlawful, under our state laws, race-based discrimination. And that is something that the Attorney General needs to rigorously enforce at this moment. We need to stop pretending as though what this administration is doing and what the courts are doing is anything other than trying to take us back to a time, frankly, where white privilege was the law of the land. It cannot happen. This is where state laws are so important, and this is the work that I promise I will do as Attorney General.
Thanks for that answer, Ellie. Mark, let's hear from you, please.
I mean, it's really astounding right now what is happening. You can see it. I see it sometimes when I go on social media and I just kind of see how some of the reactions have changed, that like the president is already starting to shift some of the larger perceptions in society. People start to think that DEI is illegal. Like that becomes like a background assumption. Of course, there is nothing unlawful about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it is consonant with our best American traditions. And we can see what the president's playbook is here. It is to make outrageous claims, to say them again and again, to pressure public and private, state and local institutions, to try to overwhelm them, to do so with claims and threats that are often themselves have no basis in the law, and to get people to simply change their actions by scaring them. And so in that kind of environment where we see that happening again and again, and we see people capitulating, what can the state attorney general do? And I think there's a few things. I think, first of all, on the positive side, it is certainly educating employers and workplaces, both public and private, about what their rights are, because they are not hearing an accurate picture from what the president is saying or what they're hearing from the U.S. Department of Justice right now. So I think that kind of guidance role is really important. I think that the power of the lawsuit obviously matters here as well, whether that is using federal law to go after the administration, but also using state law to hold accountable institutions that do capitulate if their capitulation puts them in a position where they are violating state law as well. So, I think those are some of the tactics that have to be employed at this really quite amazing moment.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
So now we're moving on to the closing statement. So now each of you will have 2 minutes to make your closing statements, and we'll start with Ellie, and then Mark, and then Karen.
Well, I first of all want to thank the People's Coalition again for hosting this really important conversation, for having these really crucial questions at this moment. And look, all of us here, we're running for office. We talk a lot about what we have done, what we plan to do in the future. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important that the People's Coalition is hosting this, because it's not about any one of us at this moment. It's about the people of the state of Michigan. And we're all running for a position where we're seeking, literally, to represent each and every one of you as our clients. That's something that I am committed to doing. I'm committed to continuing conversations. I'm committed to listening. I'm committed to continuing to strategize with and have conversations with folks about how we can best meet this moment. How can we fight back against what's coming out of DC? How can we work together to stand up to unchecked corporate greed? How can we make sure that everybody in this state has clean air to breathe and clean water to drink? How can we make sure that everybody is paid a living wage and isn't subject to wage theft, and that corporations aren't price gouging folks on the back end? At the end of the day, this election and this office, this is about all of us. It's about a movement towards a better Michigan future. It's not about any one of us as an individual. It's certainly not about me. And the last thing I will say is that I hope that this is simply the start of many more conversations, because being the people's lawyer, representing the people in court, that requires listening to your clients. It requires standing alongside each and every one of you. And I hope there are many more opportunities to do so in the future. Thank you so much again for having all of us here tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ellie. So Mark, you have your closing statements?
Again, I just want to say thanks to everyone for being part of this conversation. It's been so good to be here. I'm running to be the chief federal law enforcement officer in the state. I believe deeply in the power of the courts and the force that they play right now. But I want to be very clear. I know the courts are not going to single-handedly save us. It requires a lot more than just the courts. We have a Supreme Court that's unfriendly, and the legal process is slow for reasons that make sense. And so the work that People's Coalition and others are doing, the activism, the protests, I think it's all incredibly important to the response that we need to be making right now. And so thanks for the partnership that you all have in this really important resistance. I have deep respect for both of my colleagues, and I think, convention goers are going to have difficult choices. I'll just say something quickly about the case for me. I think it's a few things. One, I think I have a strong progressive record, whether that's protecting reproductive freedom, leading the governor's fight, prosecuting white supremacists, work I've done to help lead the biggest criminal justice reform passed in 2021 that's ever happened in a generation in Michigan. The second thing I'd say is that I think that I am best prepared to lead. I've had the privilege to serve as a lawyer in some of the highest positions in both state and federal government at a moment where our biggest threat is the federal government. And I think that's prepared me to hit the ground running. And then lastly, I just say I think I'm well positioned to win. I mean, we're a purple state. This is a non-presidential year. These elections get won at the margins. And as someone who represented not one, but 49 counties and built strong relationships all across them, I think I'm well positioned to help us do better across the state, and especially in some of those red and rural places where we need to perform more. So again, thanks for the conversation. It's been a great evening, and I hope to earn your support.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Karen?
Thanks. Look, I'm the prosecutor and the highest law enforcement official in the second largest county in the state of 1.3 million people. The only bigger county is Wayne County. And the largest prosecutor's office in the state, second largest prosecutor's office in the state of 200 people, and the second largest volume of crime. So in terms of leadership, this is what I've been doing for several years. But I've also withstood extreme scrutiny over decisions that I've made. And I have never once backed away from that. And I've shown courage. And that courage came from a place of, yep, I might not be reelected, but that's okay. I'm still going to do the right thing. Um, I'm a former judge in the family court, which is where I wanted to be because I wanted to deal and help kids and parents be reunified with their children. I'm a former lawyer in private practice. I've actually defended people charged with crimes, and I think that's probably another thing that makes me unique. but I'm a mom and I'm a doer. I'm not a talker, and I really don't consider myself a politician. Um, I get things done. And the AG is just like in terms of prosecutor, I don't want to be a legislator, and I don't want to be a political appointee. I don't want to sit around and talk about the law. I want to do things for people who need help and advocacy, who are underrepresented and forgotten and overlooked. I talk a lot all over the state. I've been to so many places, and I had the opportunity to speak to the Women's Progressive Group in Muskegon. There were 300 women that showed up there, by the way. And I talked about my story and what it was like growing up and how hard I've had to work, and also what it was like being a woman in rooms where it's usually me and a lot of white men. And afterwards, one of the servers came up to me and she wanted to get her picture with me. And she said, and she hugged me and she said, "Thank you for telling our story too." And I am the most proud of that because look, I got endorsements from a lot of impressive people. I know my opponents do too, but that means the most to me because that's what the AG needs to do. Stand up for people who don't have a voice and not just talk about it, but really do it with passion because they've lived it. And that's me. And I've had a lot of conversations with the people in this group, and I want to have more. So whose side you're on, what you're doing, call me up, talk to me, email me. And then in terms of being positioned to win, I've raised more money than both of my opponents combined. I'm really proud of that. That is not corporate money. And you know what else that is? A lot of people who don't agree with me on everything. But I have proven that I will always listen, do the right thing, and be transparent about why I'm doing it. And that is
Thank you,
why I'm in
Karen.
the best position to win this because we have to win this. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. Um, well, this brings us to the end. Thank you so, so much for each of the candidates to take the time, answer these really tough but important questions that came from a lot of the people that registered here and are here. And thank you to all the guests on Zoom for joining tonight's event. We hope you found this very valuable. There is, as we get closer to the 2026 elections, we will be hosting several other opportunities to hear from candidates like um, the event here, but we do have a forum, and I know we posted some information in the chat. There'll be a candidate forum for Michigan Secretary of State. It'll happen October 30th from 6:30 to 8, so all the candidates will be present. We'll also have a coalition-wide meeting on November 10th, where we are going to be talking about very important convention-related elections, but other things that are happening throughout. We also, for those that are South Asian, we are going to be reaching out to invite you shortly for a South Asian community meeting, a chance to share your thoughts with peers and with your state representatives and state senators. So that will be happening November 8th from 2 to 4 in Ann Arbor, but it'll cover Washington County and areas throughout. There will be much more forums, more meet and greets and events that are in the works. But please do sign up to receive our updates through our listserv, through Join Our Coalition. Follow us on social media. The links are there as well. But also, we can't do this work without donations from people like you. So please support our movement in any way you can. And I truly appreciate you all being here, especially the candidates. This will be recorded and shared because these are questions that are important to all of us. But thank you so much. And this brings us to the end. So thank you again.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.